Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, done going through puberty, so there is no voice cracks here. But let's talk horror. So today, guys, I am so honored to be joined by the beautiful Emily von Seele. Emily, how you doing today?
I'm great, Ken. Thank you so much for having me on.
No, it's such an honor. And I want to say, not only is my voice not cracking, but I looked at her name and totally knew how to pronounce it the first time. So didn't have to take any rehearsals for that whatsoever.
It was amazing. I was so impressed. It never happens.
So before we actually get rolling here, Emily, and talking about the reason why I asked you to be here, I would like people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit first. Emily hails from Seattle, the home of the Seahawks, where it does rain a lot. So that gives her plenty of time to sit inside and watch movies and hang out. But after watching these movies, she likes to write a little bit about them. And she's done so for my favorite horror website, The Daily Dead, as well as Bloody Disgusting, the Women in Horror Annual, and Grimm Magazine. But also, she doesn't want to just put one feather in the cap. She's also a podcaster as well. She is the co-host of the Dead Ringer podcast. And you guys can check her out on Twitter, where she's just gabbing excessively about horror movies, and also pictures of her adorable cats that are seriously the cutest ever. Now, let's go back to the top here first. Obviously, writing for such zines as like The Daily Dead, Bloody Disgusting, the Women in Horror Annual, like what got you started in wanting to write about horror?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I think I started, time. What even is time? I'm going to say 10 years ago, roughly, might be closer to 7, not positive. But I was watching a ton of movies, and as I was reading more and more of the discourse online and seeing the way people would not just break down reviews, but just kind of put a little of themselves into it, it really inspired me, and it connected with me in the way that I love movies as much as these people. I want to be able to share that. And so I kind of got started doing a little bit of freelance work here and there. And eventually I kind of synced up with the Daily Dead folks, who have been amazing. So I published there fairly regularly. I met a good number of friends on Twitter, wherever it's going, but in its past, I made some wonderful friends. Some of those got together, and through the connections I made with Nolan McBride, he started the Dead Ringers podcast. And so we've been able to kind of continue that breakdown of horror films and the sharing of all of the things that we collectively love through there. So it has been a great deal of fun.
Yeah. And I do want to say real quick, Brian Christopher, I recently had him, who also writes for Daily Dead. But I got to give a huge shout out to my man, Jonathan James. Jonathan,
yeah.
I've had him on the channel a couple different times, whether it was doing a franchise ranking or a My First Horror Movie episode. And I've never wanted someone to succeed in this world as much as I have Mr. James. That guy is just, he's such a down-to-earth, sweet, caring, loving individual. And when Sledgehammer Horror was in its infancy, he was still right there to be like, you know what? Yeah, I'd love to come on your podcast. I'd love to talk about how horror started for me. And being one of the sites that I really looked up to and got a lot of my news from, that really meant a lot to me. I've never forgotten how sweet and amazing of a human being he is. So that dude has my heart forever. Now, you talked about the podcast a little bit. What do you guys do over there at the podcast?
So we have a fairly big group. I think there's 7 of us. So we usually divide in half and release 2 episodes a month. And essentially it's just kind of a comparison of 2 different horror movies that might not on the surface seem like obvious matches, but through kind of thematic work and, digging in through different levels, we kind of explore some of the commonalities they have, some of the different things that overlap, and the way these 2 films can actually come together as a pairing, even though they might not obviously work as such off the top of your head. So we've done, one of my favorite pairings was Lucky McKee's May with The Eyes of My Mother. That was a lot of fun, both incredible films. So we just kind of take those as a jumping off point, and then look at some of the things that they have in common, and then the differences as well.
That's amazing. And I love that idea, the compare and contrast, something we've done since we were young, and especially to be able to do something like that I think it's really special with horror movies to, you know, unite the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon almost. To be able to do something like that, I think is really incredible. So you guys now know what she's doing right now. And you can stay up to date with that by clicking some of these links down here in the description. I have the podcast, I have the social media links. So make sure that you are following her. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast so you can stay up to date on everything there. Now, in order to write about horror, to do a podcast about horror, horror had to start for you somewhere, Emily. So now I would like to go back to the past and talk about how horror actually did start for you, your first horror movie. And Emily, the first horror movie that you watched was?
Pet Sematary.
Sometimes Dead is Better. Yes.
Yes.
What a classic movie in so many different terms. This movie means so much to me. It's one of the first times I can really, really remember being scared to my core. It still to this day has one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema. And it was my wife's first horror movie. So Pet Sematary is a very, very special movie to me as well. Do you remember about how old you were the first time that you had seen it?
Yeah, I was 14. It was the summer between junior high and high school. My parents were pretty strict with what I watched, and my dad hates horror movies. So I really didn't have a ton of opportunities in my early childhood to sneak it in. It was only when I became a teenager and got a little bit of, we'll say, a demanding attitude did they start to release the reins. But even then, like, it wasn't a free-for-all. Everything I watched was on TV, so it was heavily edited. But
Sure.
Even then, it still scared the living shit out of me, and it remains one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's such an amazing movie from start to finish. I mean, obviously, no movie's perfect besides Pee-wee's Big Adventure, so it does have its flaws. But God, it's such an amazing movie, and I love it so much. So we know that you were a young lady when you watched this for the first time, and being a child watching a movie like this with such a heavy atmosphere around it, do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
Oh, Zelda. It was everything featuring the scary, scary sister Zelda. It shook me to my very core. She was so terrifying, and that just, it sunk in so deep. It was so great.
Never get out of bed again. Yeah, I totally understand. And this is one of those moments where I think that people often, when you talk about this movie, the main talking point is probably going to be Gage. That's probably the main talking point for most people. But for me, the scenes with Zelda are so incredibly scary. But there's a scene at the end of the movie when he's carrying Rachel and he's gone mad. Lewis has just completely gone mad. And our angel of the film, Victor, is there trying to stop him once more. And Lewis is, she just died a while ago. It'll work this time. And he walks right through Victor, through his apparition. And then Victor's turned around and, Lewis, don't, no. And he does the scream. And that moment stuck with me for so long because of how just incredibly sad and scary that moment is, all rolled into one. You've just watched Gage come back to life and, kill his own mother. And then you watch this guy that's literally an angel throughout the film. We often forget how much of a angel Victor is throughout this film. Like, the whole time he's trying to stop Lewis from making this incredible mistake. And that moment right there was so much to me that it's one of those moments that I think will always be one of my absolute favorites in all of cinema, to watch that moment every time I get to see it. And this is a movie that is not only incredibly scary, but like we talked about a second ago, it's an incredibly sad movie. Obviously, the main themes of the movie, and I know I don't have to ask, but according to my script, I do have to ask, which was the scene, the death that affected you the most from Pet Sematary?
I think it's still Judd Crandall's death. It's interesting because I think that on screen, it is the most visually engaging one. It's very bloody. It's very frightening. But then the thing that kind of haunts me after the film is done is the loss of Gage. it's, you know, it's the crux of the whole film, and there's so much emotion wrapped up in it. And, you know, because it is so horrific and it's the death of a child, we don't really see much on camera. So we're left to imagine everything that this poor family is dealing in the immediate moments after it happens. And that is kind of, it's interesting because Judd is the most horrific one in the moment. Gage is the one that sticks with you and follows you after the film wraps up.
Yeah. And especially, you know, I've talked about this before, so repeat viewers, I'm sorry. A movie like Pet Sematary, I think, affects you in two different ways. That's what I love so much about horror. As a child, that was my peer that I'm watching get hit by this truck, and I feel the sadness of losing someone that could be me. As now a father of 3 children, I watch this in a whole different way, looking at, you know, from the, you know, the perspective of myself trying to stop one of my children from running into that road and tripping and being unsuccessful and watching the death of my child. And that's sad enough, but I will always go to bat, and I will die on the hill that the saddest scene in the whole movie is almost immediately after that. You get the funeral, and you have Rachel's dad coming up and starting a fight with Lewis, and Lewis pushes Rachel's dad and he falls into the coffin, and the little coffin falls, and you see Gage on the inside, and Lewis is just, again, just completely devastated again. And I couldn't imagine having to live through a moment like that. So when a movie can do something like that, it can make me feel 2 completely different things at 2 completely different moments of my life. I think that's incredibly special. Now, this next question is going to be very hard to answer in a very dark movie like this. Because, look, not all horror is dark. It just isn't. This movie's fucking dark. Now, what would you say your favorite scene from Pet Sematary would be?
Oh my God. Oh my God. I have so many.
Like, I want to go back to Gage dying. I just think about how much money that family saved in school supplies. And, you know, there's so many.
They don't have to pay for college anymore. I think my favorite scene still remains the dream sequences with Zelda, because when I was a kid, they scared the hell out of me. It was just so frightening. But then as I've gotten older and I've started to, you know, appreciate film in a different way and being able to experience it in a different way, I've noticed certain things about those scenes. If you look at the background, it's really gray and really sparse. There's not a whole lot in the set with her. The bed that she's on is really big, and it's like a big 4-poster bed, but like cartoonishly large. Yeah. So I've kind of come to the understanding that we're looking at Rachel's memories of Zelda, but they have become very nightmarish, because as she's grown, she's retained the horrible memories of living with her dying sister, but they've morphed and they've twisted and they've become something that's kind of disconnected from reality. So I think that if we were to look back and see the real Zelda, she's not as big as this actor is. She's not maybe necessarily as nightmarish, but this is what Rachel remembers, and this is what has kind of driven into her psyche. So I think it's a really complex scene that I just didn't understand when I was 14, and now I'm able to appreciate it a little bit better.
Well, especially when she even says, like, I ran out and people thought I was crying, but I was laughing because I was so happy.
Yeah.
She was dead. And in that moment, you're like, God damn, Rachel, bring it back a little. Like, your sister did just die. Let's remember that. So I get what you're saying, though. Like, and it's even us, you know, like the viewer, like there's things that we watched when we were young in this movie that you watch again as an adult. And you're like, man, I don't remember it being like that. I remember that being a lot scarier. And I think that that's just like the human nature of, we connect dots sometimes in our heads on movies or moments in our life that maybe didn't happen the way, but we over dramatize it in our own brains, because that's just human nature. That's who we are, and that's how we do it. So I love these dots you're connecting right there, because that makes so much sense once I hear you say it. It's like, wow, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. You know, maybe she wasn't this big, scary, broken back looking monster. She was just a regular girl, but in her young mind, seeing the deformity of spinal bifida, I think that's what she had, could create a monster looking image to a 7, 8, 9-year-old. So that's a brilliant take on it. I really, really like that. So if you guys ever hear me talk about that in the future, you heard it here first. So obviously we talk about your first horror movie being Pet Cemetery. And usually I ask people, would you like to see your first horror movie remade today? Well, 2019 has come and gone, so that's already happened. Did you watch the 2019 Pet Cemetery? And if so, were you a fan of that film?
I did watch it. Sure, I'll call myself a fan. I don't watch it as frequently as I watch the original, because the original it strikes me more distinctly. It's part of my history as a horror fan. But honestly, I don't think they did a bad job with the remake. I think that they did what they could to differentiate it from the original adaptation. I think they took a few steps to try to keep it a little more in line with Stephen King's original book. And honestly, if someone were to say, I'm going to go watch Pet Sematary for the first time and I'm going to pick the 2019 one, I would say, cool, you're still getting Pet Sematary. Nothing that they changed in that script makes it so different that it's not the same story. So I think that, you know, it might not be my favorite version of the material, but I think it's a really valid film.
Mm-hmm. Here's where you and I will disagree. I really, really genuinely like Pet Sematary 2019. I think it's a very, very good film. I think it could border on greatness if they would have kept more Victor in the film. Victor was such a smaller character in this film that it took away, and maybe it's just because, like I talked earlier about how impactful the big scenes with Victor were to me. You know, even when he's in the room, Pascal. Wait, did she say Pascal? You know, like those moments to me were so huge as a child, and those were ingrained in my brain so much. And I will say that 2019 did something very special that I wish they would have touched more on. And it's the idea of the children in the masks that are walking, having the funeral procession, going up to the pet cemetery. I wish we could have gotten more of those kids. I wish we could have gotten a bigger story on them. So
that was such a great visual. You're right. I wish that we would have dove a little bit more into that, because it was just so creepy looking.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And maybe in the future you'll get something that touches more on those kids. That's all I'm going to say. But we know about your first horror movie and what that movie means to you, being Pet Sematary. But now they finally stopped filming Scream 6. So my little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Emily? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh my God, how much time do we have for me to sit here and think about it? Because it really is a Sophie's Choice level question.
And it's so funny because I never tell anybody that I'm going to ask them this question for that reason. I do not want you to think about it. I want you to just, you know what? I'm on an airplane right now. I can take one horror movie with me for the ride. What's the movie I'm taking?
I'm going to default back to my favorite movie of all time, which is Jaws. I do consider it a horror movie. I know that there is a debate there. Not going to fight it out with anybody. I think it's a horror movie, and it is my favorite movie. I will watch that movie. Like, it's my desert island movie. If I only get one movie for the rest of my life, I will watch it on repeat.
You may be a nicer person than me, because if anybody out there wants to debate if Jaws is a horror movie, I'll gladly take you on. I'll put on the gloves. I'll get the 8-ounces even, and we can go out and we can duke this out, because I will fight to the death that Jaws is a horror movie. I didn't want to potty train because of Jaws. That may be embarrassing for some people. I don't give a shit. Sharks live in water. My butt goes over the water. Not gonna happen. No, thank you.
That decision, pure logic base. I respect that.
See, I've never seen maybe I'm wrong. There was one time in the 90s that I was wrong, so it could happen again. I've never seen a shark in a diaper. I've seen them in water. Never seen them in a diaper. So
yeah, this tracks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Your move, Mom. So obviously I've had an amazing time talking with you and learning how horror started for you. And like I said, anybody that works for Daily Dead or does the things that you do is good people with me. So it's amazing to learn how this started for you, because you're obviously an influence in the genre now, because there's a lot of people that go to Daily Dead to get their news, and there's a lot of people that listen to podcasts to learn new things about horror movies, and you are a part of that influence now. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing some of that with me. But before I let you go, we always end this with the same question. I think I know the answer, but again, my script, got to follow it. we're going to bounce back to Pet Sematary. And what we're going to do is we're going to rank this on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking this movie on acting, production, score, nothing like that. We're strictly ranking Pet Sematary on how much this movie affected you on your first viewing of the film. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Emily, what would your ranking of Pet Sematary be?
Solid 5.
Knew it.
Solid 5.
Knew it.
Even though it was a TV watch, middle of the afternoon, so the sun is shining, and I was getting ready to go to like our town's like little carnival thing afterwards. Like nothing took me out of the film. I was completely immersed, scared the hell out of me, and I got that feeling that comes from being really terrified, where it's almost electric and you shut the TV off and walk away and it stays with you. And I was a junkie for that feeling ever since.
I've always said that for me, especially, horror movies is a drug. And the first time you do it, you get that high, and then you're constantly chasing that dragon, trying to get that feeling again. And there are still movies today. There are 2 movies in the last 2 years that have come out that have completely scared me to my core as a 36-year-old man. And 2020's The Dark and the Wicked is one of them.
Yes.
That movie absolutely terrified me. It stuck. Me and Ashley, my wife, I've told this story before too. This is genuine. This is real. I am a what you see is what you get type of guy. We were watching this movie at probably 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a sick day or something. And I was like, babe, if you want to open the blinds, that's cool. Like, I won't be mad about it. If you want to just, let a little more light in here, I'll be fine with it. And a very recent watch, actually, 2022's The Harbinger is a movie that just, oh my gosh, scares me.
I just watched that one.
Like the idea of not being killed, but being wiped out, being completely forgotten. That's a hard pill to swallow. That's a scary thought. And there was a lot of visuals in that movie I thought were amazing. If you guys haven't seen these films, I can't recommend The Dark and the Wicked or The Harbinger enough. They are amazing, amazing films. And
so brilliant.
Yes, the movies that just took me by surprise. They were movies that I threw on, as background to kind of do writing and do editing, and just got completely immersed in these films. So I do, Emily, want to say once again, thank you. I know that you are very busy. You do a lot out there. And the fact that you're willing to take a little bit of time to come and hang out with me and talk horror is super, super special. So thank you for doing that. But please don't go anywhere, love. I have a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.